Welcome to Distribution Talk with Jason Bader, the show where we dive into the stories, struggles, and solutions from business owners and thought leaders in the wholesale distribution market. Hey friends, Jason here. In this episode, I had the pleasure of reconnecting with Jim Henderson, president of Dynamic Sales in St. Louis, Missouri. Dynamic Sales is a fastener distributor focused on the industrial and construction markets. Jim is a man of deep conviction and faith. He makes no bones about it. His relationship with his faith is woven through his personal and professional life. As you will hear, it is not a religious statement, but really a statement of values and guiding principles. I enjoyed listening to his thoughts, and I hope you will too. All right. Well, Jim, thank you so much for coming on the show. Really appreciate you being a part of Distribution Talk.
Glad to be here, Jason. Thanks for inviting me.
Oh, my pleasure. My pleasure. So please, if you could tell us in the audience just a little bit about Dynamic Sales and really why you got involved in distribution. How did you come to be part of this world here?
Well, Dynamic Sales is in our 54th year. We began in 1966. Mm-hmm. My father started the company. He was the regional manager for Omark Industries.
Oh, yeah. I remember Omark. Sure.
Okay. So he was the regional manager for them and was doing very well. But there was something he didn't like about the future with them that he saw. I don't know what that was, but he decided he wanted to buy out from underneath them and become his own company. And so he did that. And we started the proverbial way as all the other staff to founders. You know, he was working out of the back of his station wagon and loading up his car, and he'd take off and be gone for Monday through Friday and come back on Friday, load back up and head back out the next week, that kind of thing. And so he did that for a while out of the home. Then he got property, and we moved into a location over on Natural Bridge in Hanley. And we were there for many years, and he continued to grow the business. And we left that location after he died, actually. And I ended up moving it into a industrial park with better facilities and 4 dock doors now, and just different opportunities like that for us. And it's been great. Of course, I've been involved with it since the beginning of my life. My first job was emptying trash cans for him for a quarter on the weekend, you know.
Yeah. I know the feeling of that kind of, that labor relationship. I understand that, my friend.
All of those odd tasks that you have in distribution went to his kids, and we got paid weekly, very weekly.
Yeah, very weekly. Yes, very weekly indeed, my friend. Yeah.
And then my entrance into it is kind of unique because I was the youngest. Well, I am the youngest of 5, and I was the only one that went to college out of high school. Okay. And my father thought, well, I would go to college and get a business degree and come back and run his company. And I said, yeah, Dad, I don't see that happening. I'm really not interested in your company. It bores me. I've been around it all my life. I'm going to do other things. And he said, hey, I appreciate that. Go do what you need to do. So I went out and I was going to, tackle the world and do my own thing. And the world punches back and you say, what am I going to do? And so after I'd tried my hand at several different things, I decided it was time to get serious. And I had 5 job offers at the time. And when that came through, I was working in the banking industry.
Oh, okay.
And theirs was one of the offers to open up a new branch. And then I had several others. And my father's was actually a pretty attractive, offer. And I thought, I'm still young, and I'm thinking, I'll give the old man a break. I'll go back and work for him and, cut him some slack.
Sure. Yeah.
So I go back and I tell him, I'll come work for you. And he puts me in shipping and receiving. I'm like, excuse me?
You were looking for that entry-level management job.
Right.
Yeah.
And he said one of the wisest things he said. He was known for saying wise things in retrospect. Of course, I didn't realize it then.
Right.
And he said, son, I don't give positions. I give opportunities. We'll see what you can do.
Ooh, there you go. Yeah.
And I didn't know what he was doing at the time, quite honestly. But, now I sit here as the owner of the company some 30 years later, and I've worked every position getting up to here. So I know how the company runs.
Yeah.
And it was really beneficial the way he did that, because when he died, it was pretty seamless moving right into this next generation, and the customers didn't see a difference of business philosophy or anything because I'd already been brought up in it and trained for it.
Isn't it amazing how the older we get, we realize how really smart our parents were? I tell you, my friend, I mean, I'm shocked all the time. I look around, I'm like, man, that was smart. At the time, of course, I think, oh, yeah, whatever,
Exactly.
Think, oh. it does amaze me on a regular basis, especially when I go out and visit other companies. I look, I'm like, wow, he wasn't that bad at this. He's pretty good. He was pretty good at this.
Yeah, my dad did know what he was talking about.
Exactly.
Imagine that.
Exactly. Imagine that.
I always used to say, Dad, I'm not sure how this happened, but I went to college, got a 4-year degree, and you got smart.
Yeah, exactly.
Sure
what happened? I don't know what happened here. No, that's really interesting. And then you made that decision, and it sounds to me like it's just a conscious decision. It's like, okay, I am going to go and get involved. I think one of the things that when we enter our family businesses, we try to make a mark and we try to make an impact in some area. What area did you really gravitate to, Jim?
To be honest, when I first started, I wasn't really thinking much about where I was going to go in the company. Mm-hmm. I thought, okay, well, I'm in shipping and receiving. I'm going to be working in the warehouse. Yeah. I'll just keep my head down and do what I need to do and learn what I can learn. Mm-hmm. And then he moved me up a little at a time. And next thing you know, I'm in sales. And I thought, okay, I'll be in sales and this is what I'll be doing. And when I moved into sales, I was working with him and my older brother, Bruce. And they said, hey, you're going to head up our industrial division. I said, great. What's that? And they said, we don't know. You're going to create it. So that's where I got to make my mark and figure out what does it look like to go after industrial? Who are industrial? How do we define them? And how do I grow that market? And so I just started knocking on doors of hospitals and municipalities and school districts and manufacturers and growing from there. And it's kind of kept that channel. My brother was always heavily concentrated on the contractor side, and I was concentrated on the industrial side. And as we brought other salespeople in, they all generated to the contractor side, and they just let me continue with the industrial side.
Gotcha. So today, is that still primarily contractor based?
Right now, the majority of our business comes from the industrial side.
Okay. I kind of thought so. I thought that's where you were.
Yeah, that's really my passion. I love doing that. In fact, when we brought a new CFO on a number of years ago, a longtime friend of mine, we'd known each other all our lives, and he's a CPA and corporate attorney by trade. And he came in, he's looking over everything, looking at the business, and he said, okay, first thing is, you get out on the street and get out of the office. You're much more effective in front of customers than you are trying to run this place. Leave.
That's a great, okay.
And I went, okay. And he was dead on. I was very hands-on controlling the business and trying to get us through some murky waters. And he said, you've gotten us through that. Now get out. And I did. And I left running the office to a very competent team here. And while I work on the big picture stuff, I don't worry about the minutia of everything. And that's handled by everybody here. And I just focus on customers and I enjoy it.
That's great. So it sounds to me, like that's your favorite part of the business is that customer interaction, that face-to-face. Tell me, how about the recruiting side? I mean, bringing others in. I mean, sometimes I know that when people are very sales driven, that sometimes recruiting and bringing people in and introducing them to either your method or, that customer base can be a little bit of a challenge.
Indeed. I have struggled with that over the years, bringing people on board because I look at what's worked for me and I think, well, that's going to work for everybody, but it doesn't always. And sometimes I have hired out of desperation instead of out of competency, looking for a body to fill a position. Yep. And that always bites me every time I've done that. Mm-hmm. And what I ended up doing, quite honestly, is I said, okay, I've gone through the courses staff offered on hiring and interviewing and all those types of things and read the books, and I tried applying those things and I was still not having a good success rate. And I said, you know what, Lord, I'm done with this. When you have somebody ready, you're going to have to let me know, because every time I've tried and do this, I'm not doing real well. I'll hire somebody, they don't last long, and I have to take the responsibility for that because I'm the one who hired them. Yeah. And so when I changed that perspective and just waited on the Lord to send the right people, he's assembled a wonderful team here for us, and I'm much happier with the results.
No, that's fantastic. I mean, I think, sometimes we get in our own way.
Indeed.
Yeah,
I did that a lot.
Getting our own way. And, try to force a bad fit. And
Yes.
just because, we're backed up against the wall. I mean, I think that's one of the things that I talk to clients about a lot is really, if someone comes along, even if you don't have a position available, if someone comes along that you look at them and say, I think you fit who I'm looking for. There's this cultural or this connection with an individual, or you feel like, yes, this is someone who can really grow with our organization. I try to coach people to bring them in the organization, figure out how to get them in the door, and then see if they'll blossom. But because I find that attitude and behavior, that's much more important to me than your previous life, and your skill set and whatnot.
That was a point that I reached too, because I figured the people the Lord sent are the people we need to work with. And I looked at who are they? What is their character? Who are they at their core? Because I can teach product knowledge.
Absolutely.
I can't teach drive. I can't teach ethics. I can't teach character. And if they have those things already, we're halfway there, because the knowledge of fasteners or power tools or cords or whatever, that's easy.
Yeah, absolutely. So Jim, how do you assess that? When do you, when you see somebody, what are you looking for? How do you find that right fit?
One of the things I try to find is what my brother and I used to term a servant's heart, someone who is willing to serve the customer and put the customer's needs before their own. And that's difficult to find, but you look for character traits. One of those character traits is a teachable spirit and humility. But you want that, at least what I'm looking for, is someone who has those with confidence, so they can go out and be confident in who they are, what they're doing, but they're doing it with a servant's heart and a teachable spirit. Customers are much more receptive to that than they are to a braggadocio know-it-all.
Yeah, for sure. That's quite an interesting balance. My favorite definition of humility is always to remain teachable. But that with confidence, that's a hard balance right there. In some respects, it could feel like an oxymoron, but then no, there is that combination, that winning combination, but it's not easy to find at all.
So that's what we've done. And I think that often comes out when you do first meet somebody. One young man that I hired, he was actually our newspaper delivery guy at our home. Yeah. And I'd been having trouble getting the paper delivered properly. And I'd been calling the circulation desk and complaining about it. And one Saturday morning, he stopped by to drop off the paper, and it was early and I was out cleaning the car. And he stopped and got out and came up and talked to me. And just the way he handled himself and presented himself and just talked with me, I went, wow. And he left, and I'm thinking to myself, this young man's got a lot on the ball. I think he would make a great part of our team. So the next week, I intentionally waited for him to show up because I didn't know how to contact him. When he showed up, I handed him my business card and I said, if you want to talk further about opportunities, give me a call. And he did. And he came to work for us. He was a good fit. Unfortunately, he got injured playing some pickup basketball with his buddies on the weekend, and it took him out for 6 months.
I'll tell you, you got to be careful at a certain age of those pickup basketball games. Right?
We'll pick up anything.
I know. I tell you, it was at my younger son's basketball game. They wanted me to fill in a practice, and I'm like, I don't know, man. I don't know about that injury.
I come down on my ankle wrong. I'm in trouble.
Right. I'm in a lot of trouble here. I got to get on a plane eventually here. So
indeed.
That's funny. Oh, that's funny. But yeah, I think, that's really interesting that you said that you find people in the most unusual places, just, such a strange place. I mean, I have good friends that have, a restaurant that they would go to every, at lunch all the time. And the server, they say, that person, and hand them their business card. And that person is invited to at least come pursue an opportunity. Often when people are looking for new employees or new blood into the organization, they get really stymied on where to look. And they tend to go through those traditional channels of, maybe we'll go at a recruiter, we'll look, in these different, maybe Indeed or different types of searching, or sadly that they'll go start poaching other companies.
Right.
Where I don't think you have to do that. I think those are more acts of desperation than actually, planning or really letting it go, letting go and allowing those opportunities to come into your life.
Right. Yeah. In fact, our key account manager, Tony Sappho, I've been buying vehicles for the company and myself from him for over 20 years. Yeah. And I went in one day just to chat with him, and we got to talking about grandkids and catching up and this sort of thing. And I ended up walking out of there with 3 new vehicles with no intent of going in there buying any. And then within 2 months, he was working for us.
Oh, that's great.
He was ready to get out of the car business because of the hours and the demands on your time and all. And he wanted something where he had a life outside of work, which is hard to get in the car business because you're working every holiday, you're working weekends, you're working nights, all of that. So that worked out well. That was another really good story of getting somebody on board.
Interesting. It kind of dawned on me, my younger brother, Jordan, his CFO was our loan officer. He managed the line for the bank and had developed a long-term relationship, understood the organization, understood the goals of the company, and it just seemed like a natural fit. Did not have to be a CPA, coming in and has had a phenomenal career with my brother. So
those are the people that have worked out best for our company, is the ones that I wasn't trying to make fit.
Yep, I know. And I think that's absolutely it. And again, sometimes when people are growing really rapidly, they have to start compromising that feeling, and you get yourself in a lot of trouble doing that. So interesting. If we could, for a minute here, just kind of chat. You all have been extremely involved, not only in the trade association you and I grew up in, but other trade associations. Actually, let's step back on that, on STAFTA. Your father was a huge part of really starting that whole organization.
Right. Him and a number of gentlemen that were on the early board, and some of our earliest presidents had gotten together and decided they needed to do something at the time to try and combat Hilti, which was the big headache back then. And they were trying to come up with, how can we do this? What can we do? And they were just, meeting together and writing ideas on cocktail napkins.
Sure.
Our original logo was written on a cocktail napkin, of course, and it didn't look like it does today. I've got some of that original letterhead.
Oh, really? Neat. Yeah.
So it's pretty cool just looking at some of that. And Dad was very involved in that and worked with them in writing the Constitution and bylaws. And that group hired Maury Halverson, who was working for Milwaukee Tool at the time, and offered him commission on the number of people he could bring in. And boy, did the company start growing.
I remember
was
you
quite
and I
the salesman.
Oh, yeah. You and I sitting at the board. When you and I are on the board of that association, looking down and going, Hey, what happened here? Look at this commission here. This is a big deal.
Well, and what's funny to me is that my dad was, in leadership when they brought Maury on board, and I was in leadership and on the board when we brought Georgia on board.
Yes.
And I'm like, wow, that's really quite the turn of events.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
And Georgia, of course, I just think the world of her, and I have known each other through all of this. She used to play the piano at the, the national anthem and things like that at the opening ceremonies for all 20 of us. And I would carry people's luggage to their room and that sort of thing and help them bring things in.
Yeah.
It's grown quite a bit from those days.
It really has. But, what's so interesting, Jim, is the relationships that we've developed and kept, through that affiliation with that organization. I tell you, probably on a weekly basis, I am touching base with someone from that organization that I became friends with, 20 years ago,
right?
25 years ago. It amazes me.
To me, that's the most valuable part of STAFTA is the connections and the friendships that you make. And, the neat thing is, and I'm doing this right now, I'm trying to track some odd parts for a good customer.
Yeah.
And I'm talking with Michelle St. John, who is STAFTA's president.
I know Michelle very well.
So IBS, and they've got all this. I'm like, hey, Michelle, can you help us out with this? And she's putting me in touch with the people and point me in the right direction. And, so being able to use my network, and I have used that from coast to coast, north, south, east, and west, and been able to connect with people, and they're always willing to help a fellow STAFTA member out.
Isn't that amazing? Michelle was one of my early guests on this show.
Oh, great.
And she was a pleasure. And she and I have now developed a relationship, but, really actually from the interview on this, and my business partner, Marshall Jones, I met him through STAFTA. And so it's just so funny how we develop these professional relationships, and a lot of them are facilitated by these associations, these trade associations.
Right. Well, STAFTA has been really good for us, and I look forward to it each year just to not only see what's going on in the industry, but more to connect with everybody that I only connect with through email the rest of the year.
Very true. Very, very true. No, you make a very good point. And I think what's so fascinating, and as you know, I've been traveling for 16 years and going around and working with a lot of different trade associations now. I get to see, how they're run compared to staff, but also, those relationships with other association execs and people involved with them. I will say, by the way, Staff is a very well-run organization. I have seen
Indeed.
ones that are not well-run. And what I think is fascinating is people will join these associations and they'll hang out on the sidelines. And that just makes no sense to me whatsoever.
Right. Yeah. Being involved makes a huge difference, and the connections you get out of it, it's invaluable.
It is. And I truly believe the ones that stay in the middle, you insulate yourself from some really negative things that can happen to organizations. When they get too far out on the fringes and they're not willing to ask for help or develop these relationships, frankly, they're the ones that have a really rough time when the economy turns the other way.
Right. Because you can turn to them not just for help trying to find a product, but Paul Arndt, who was one of our presidents.
I remember Paul. Yeah.
I approached him years ago and I said, Paul, I'm having some business issues. I wondered if we might be able to chat. And he said, yeah, why don't you come on up and we'll spend a day together. And he said, I want you to know this is a privilege for me to do because your father did this for me when I was in that position. So now that I can do it for you is such a privilege. And I mean, those kinds of relationships, they just continue to pay forward.
Absolutely, boy. And Paul's one of the good ones. I mean, he was really, a really great gentleman. Actually, when I came on the board of the association, he was one of those that kind of took me aside and said, here's some things to think about on the board. And here's, kind of how to conduct yourself and to navigate that 4 or 5 years of commitment. So,
right.
That's a really neat byproduct. I mean, I really think that's a big deal. And when people are not taking advantages of the services, and I think you're right, the biggest thing is the association of people. When they don't take advantage of that, they're really missing out. Why are you paying your dues if that's not the major focus?
I would agree.
Yeah. So one of the big things and that I've known you for so many years is your faith and your commitment and your dedication and devotion. Has that always been a part of your family and your business, or is it something you developed a little later in your life?
Well, I grew up in a Christian home. When I grew up, though, I had a religion as opposed to a relationship with the Lord. In other words, I had all of the, right answers. I did the church things and that sort of stuff, but I didn't really have that personal relationship. And that changed for me about 29. I got to know the difference between having that relationship and having a religion. And so when Bruce and I were running the company, my father had always run the company on Christian principles. But what Bruce and I did that was different is we dedicated the company to the Lord. So that now meant that the company belonged to the Lord. We worked for him. And so that meant we had to conduct ourselves accordingly. So even though my father conducted business by Christian principles, we were now saying, hey, this company belongs to the Lord and we're serving him. And one of the things we started doing was tithing on behalf of the company through company profits, because that wasn't something we were doing. But I was reading through a book called Business by the Book, written by Larry Burkett. And he was a Christian financial advisor. And I read that book and it talked about, are you tithing from your business? And I'm like, well, no, I didn't think you should. And as I read that chapter, I felt very convicted. And I sat Bruce down and I said, hey, we need to start tithing from the business. And he's like, what? And we did that. And we've continued to do that to this day. And, people appreciate that. And I mean, we're very clear on who we are. We each chose a scripture to make part of our logo. Mine is John 14:6. Jesus said, I'm the way, the truth, and the life. No man comes to the Father but through me. And Bruce's was Matthew 6:33. Seek ye first his kingdom and his righteousness, and all these things shall be added unto you. And so we've made those the focal points of our business. And the 4 points of our star logo are service, quality, commitment, and integrity. And those all line up with those principles that we gather from our faith.
Thank you for sharing that with me, because sometimes people don't always like to share that publicly. And I was kind of gambling there and betting that you were okay with that. I've known you long enough. I think sometimes business and somebody's personal values, I think too many times people try to separate that. And I am always impressed and fascinated when people are willing to integrate that as much as humanly possible, really bring that together and really just make it part of what you do on a daily basis, no matter what you're doing.
Right. And the analogy that I have given to people who have said, oh, well, you can't mix, business and religion. I said, well, first of all, I'm not, because this is a relationship, not a religion.
Good
and I
point.
said, second of all, I said, the analogy I would give you is that to tell me to take that part of my life out would be like asking me every morning when I leave the home and kiss my wife to take my wedding ring off, leave it in the car, and pretend I'm not married for the day. Charlene is such an integral part of my life. I can't separate myself from her. The Lord is such an integral part of my life. I can't separate myself from my relationship with Christ.
Yeah, no, it's a great analogy. I mean, I think that it really kind of brings it home for us. I guess one of the questions I have is in the organization, and, as you grow an organization or you have a longevity, there are going to be people that come into the company that may not feel comfortable with that.
Exactly.
And how have you dealt with that situation? And I'm sure it's come up.
It has. And, the thing is, we see ourselves as a light in the world. Mm-hmm. And so we don't look to hire just Christians, because then, all we're doing is surrounding ourselves with Christians, and we're eating Christian cookies. We surround ourselves by the people that the Lord sends our way. And if they are walking with Christ, fine. If they're not, that's fine too, as long as they have the character traits we're looking for. Right. And they know where I'm at in faith, and they know that that's the core of our company. And as long as they're comfortable with that, I don't expect them to change or become a Christian to be here. Hold on to whatever their beliefs are, but understand that the way you conduct yourself has to align with the values that we have. And so it's worked out well. We haven't forced anything on anybody, and they're free to express their opinion. They're free to express their views, and we accept those views.
Well, that's really refreshing, because I think that's one of the fears that people have when they encounter a Christian-based company or some form of faith, religion, or whatnot. Is there's a fear, an absolute fear, because they don't really know what's expected of them or how they're going to be a part of this going forward.
And I think that's very true, Jason. And unfortunately, Christians have typically brought that on themselves by being so narrow-minded and not willing to reach out. But, Christ talked with everybody. Christ reached out to, quote, the people on the side, the outcasts, the people that weren't part of the in-religious crowd. And really, I think what happens is when people focus so much on religion instead of a relationship, you get these problems that you're talking about. My friend Steve Brown recently wrote a book called Talk the Walk, which is a little different. And he's saying basically how to be right without being insufferable. And Christians tend to be insufferable because they talk about always being right. But we don't have to be right. We don't have to be someone's mother. We don't have to convince them. All we have to do is live out our faith and actually talk the walk. Let our words match the walk we're supposed to have.
Fascinating. No, that's a really great way to approach that, Jim. I'm glad that you mentioned that sometimes people don't believe that there is a place for both, and I don't agree with that. I really don't. Where you fall on the wrong side of HR is when you become insufferable.
Yes,
that's it. I mean, and trust me, I have been around that before. I've run into that.
Well, and we all have. We've all met people, and you're like, wow, really? What a pain.
Yeah. Well, not only a pain, but you're going to get yourself sued here. Sometimes from an advisor standpoint, I have to remind people, look, if you've hired me to come look at your company and talk to you about what I see, I think here's a place you need to be careful, and that can be a tough conversation with somebody. That, hey, well, it's my company. Well, I know it's your company, but sadly, there's also a law that you have to be aware of. I'm not going to tell you exactly how you should do it, but you need to be aware of this going forward.
And really what it boils down to is allowing grace. We've been shown grace, so we need to show grace to others. I didn't always walk with the Lord. I was, I was not where I needed to be, but people who were had grace with me and brought me along. And, we need to do the same thing.
Yeah, absolutely. Interesting. So, Jim, and I'm just looking down the time here, and I told you it was going to happen. I told you we were going to be running up against time. So where do you see yourself going here in the next few years? What's the next big thing?
I'm excited about the future for Dynamic because we've made some good hires recently, and the young man we just hired for our operations manager has some great ideas to help move us forward, because I've always recognized that I'm not the one that's going to lead the company into the next technological advance we need. and that I need to have a team on board that can do that. And that's not me. So I need to step out of the way and allow them to do that while I focus on my industrial accounts that I love doing. That's what we're planning for right now. We're planning on a way to free me up to focus on my national sales and allow the team here to focus on new technologies, new opportunities, and that sort of thing, so that I'm not the old guy holding them back.
That's a refreshing thing, because I've seen a few of them. I've met a few. So, well, Jim, thank you so much for taking the time. This was fantastic catching up with you, my friend.
It's been fun. I enjoyed this.
Always a pleasure. Well, you take care and best of luck.
All right. Take care, Jason. Good talking with you.
Thank you for listening. If you liked what you heard, consider hitting that subscribe button. Links to sponsors, products, and services mentioned during this episode can be found in the show description area on your podcast application or at www.distributiontalk.com. Distribution Talk is edited and mixed by Andrea Klunder and Edwin Ruiz at the Creative Imposter Studios. This episode was brought to you by my company, The Distribution Team. We are a consulting services firm dedicated to helping wholesale distribution clients remove barriers to profitability, generate wealth, and achieve personal goals. To learn more about how we can help your company succeed, check us out at www.thedistributionteam.com.